Coming up today, forensic tests confirm the suspected ringleader of the Paris attacks has been killed. Officials say he was linked to a number of other foiled terror attacks. Despite tensions over the South China Sea, Asia-Pacific nations close ranks against international terrorism at this year's APEC summit. Plus, the UN General Assembly votes in record numbers to condemn North Korea for its grave human rights violations. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, November 20th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the latest on the recent terror attacks in Paris. Investigators now say the suspected ringleader of the attacks was indeed killed in a shootout with police on Wednesday morning local time. Tests of skin samples have confirmed Abdelhamid Abaoud, a senior figure in the group that calls itself Islamic State, was one of the two suspects killed. It's thought the Belgian jihadist could have also played a part in the foiled attack on a Paris-bound train in August, as well as some other foiled attempts. The manhunt goes on for 26-year-old Salah Abdeslam, who rented a car used to carry gunmen to the Bataclan concert hall in Paris. The French Prime Minister has admitted that France does not know where he is or whether more groups with links to the gunman are still at large. Now, outside of France, 9 people are being questioned following raids in Brussels. Belgian authorities have been searching for suspects linked to the suicide bomber who blew himself up outside the Stade de France. Also, reports have emerged that ISIS is desperately trying to develop chemical weapons. Various security sources told the Associated Press that ISIS has set up a branch dedicated to research with the help of scientists from Syria, Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries. Now, China has made clear that it will no longer stay out of matters concerning the Islamic State militant group. Beijing has condemned ISIS for killing a Chinese national. But will the execution prompt China to take up a greater role in Syria? Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
China has vowed to bring to justice those responsible for executing a citizen held hostage by the Islamic State militant group, or ISIS. China's foreign ministry on Thursday confirmed the man's identity as Pan Jinghui, who was held captive by ISIS in September. The militant group previously identified him as a 50-year-old freelance consultant from Beijing. It's unclear why he went to the Middle East. The ministry said the government had tried to rescue Pan by activating an emergency mechanism. Chinese media reports said President Xi Jinping, who was in Manila for the APEC summit, strongly condemned the killing. The ministry said it will strengthen the country's anti-terrorism cooperation with the international community to bring criminals to justice. Up until now, China had been reluctant to get involved in destroying military targets in Syria and Iraq, where the group largely operates. News of the execution comes as world powers scramble to figure out how to defeat the terrorist group. Russia submitted a revised UN resolution on fighting the Islamic State Wednesday, 2 months after a previous version was rejected. Pan Jinghui is the first and so far only known Chinese citizen that has been held hostage by ISIS. Pictures of him and a Norwegian captive were published in the group's online magazine Dabik Wednesday under the headline Executed. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the growing anxiety prompted by the terror attacks in Paris is being felt right here in Korea, which has had its own scares in recent weeks. So, is Korea safe from terrorist attacks? Kwon So-ah talked to some Korean citizens and experts for their views.
France, Russia, and Lebanon have all been hit by major terrorist attacks in the last 3 weeks, and all have been claimed by the militant group calling itself Islamic State. With ISIS threatening more attacks, people across the world have begun to say they don't feel safe in public anymore. What about Korea? It was recently ranked as the safest of 120 countries, jumping from 9th last year.
But the seriousness and fear of terrorism seems to be even spreading into this country, as many citizens I talked to here in the capital, Seoul, believe there is a chance of terror attacks here in Korea.
With globalization and the freedom to travel, everyone can come and go as they please. I'm worried that Korea's security isn't strong enough.
It's safer than places like Europe and the Middle East, but I don't think Korea is in a safe zone.
Those concerns are growing. An illegal immigrant was arrested on Wednesday for suspected ties to a terrorist group. And last month, the National Intelligence Service reported a possible threat from ISIS on the COEX complex in southern Seoul.
ISIS expanding its power beyond their main strongholds of Iraq and Syria to North Africa, Europe, and Asia. On the recent 11th issue of APEC, which is ISIS propaganda magazine, they listed Japan and Korea.
So how prepared would Korea be in a case of an attack?
We South Koreans do not have specific law to regulate terrorist attack or how to respond when terror occurs. So that implies if terror occurs, we have no controlling body. From the terrorist point of view, they try to coordinate and they attack simultaneously. So it's very urgent for Korean politicians to pass the specific law.
Experts are also concerned that the rising anxiety could result in unnecessary prejudice against the growing Muslim population, and many say that an analytical approach to ISIS is needed more than ever before. 권소아, Arirang News.
Now, the two-day APEC summit came to a close in the Philippines on Thursday, with President Park Geun-hye and other world leaders adopting a joint declaration condemning all acts of terrorism. South Korea also announced that it will host the summit in 2025. Hwang Sang-hee filed this report from Manila.
President Park and other Asia-Pacific leaders strongly denounced terrorism through a joint declaration following their two-day summit. Referring to the terrorist attacks in Paris, Beirut, and against Russian aircraft over Sinai, the 21 APEC leaders said they strongly condemn all acts, methods, and practices of terrorism. They went on to stress the urgent need for increased international cooperation and solidarity in the fight against terrorism. The leader said they will not allow terrorism to threaten the fundamental values that underpin free and open economies. In one voice, they said that economic growth and prosperity are the most powerful tools to address the root causes of terrorism.
By including the determination to counter terrorism in the opening statement, the declaration reflects that terrorism is not only a political issue, but also one of the biggest hurdles for economic prosperity that urgently requires the leaders' collective action.
The APEC summit is one of the best-known annual forums on economic issues in the region. But this year's summit was largely overshadowed by the issue of terrorism, as it came less than a week after the deadly terror attacks in Paris. On the economic front, the leaders noted the importance of enabling full participation of all sectors of society, especially women, youth, and small and mid-sized businesses, to achieve inclusive growth. Wrapping up the two-day event, Korea announced that it will play host to the APEC summit in 2025, for the second time since it was held in the country's southeastern port city of Busan 10 years ago.
President Park will now fly to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia as the final stop in her three-nation tour. There she is set to attend the ASEAN Plus 3 Summit, the Korea-ASEAN Summit, and the East Asia Summit. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Manila.
Now, inclusive growth was the buzzword at this year's APEC summit. President Park proposed ways for member nations to support each other's small and mid-sized businesses beyond their borders. Our Kwani Kim has this report.
Small and mid-sized enterprises going beyond borders is what President Park Geun-hye proposed as she called for inclusive growth in the Asia-Pacific economic integration. This means SMEs that account for 97% of total companies in the region will go beyond domestic sales and ship their products and services overseas, ultimately fostering economic integration. President Park called for APEC member economies to support their SMEs certified as authorized economic operators. Firms are approved if they have no record of defaulting or violating the law for the past 3 years and recorded a net income in the previous year.
영내 중소기업이 성실 무역업체 공인제도를 통해 신속한 통관 절차를 진행하고 글로벌 가치 사슬에도 쉽게 참여할 수 있도록 APEC 각국이 정책적 노력을 기울여 주시기를 바랍니다.
This global value chain will encourage companies to carry out their business activities on a global level. President Park also stressed the need for boosting competitiveness in the service industry, introducing Korea's deregulation efforts in the sector. That's why she proposed a project to analyze regulations in service industries across the region. Stressing the need to accelerate efforts for regional economic integration, President Park reaffirmed Korea's willingness to push forward with the implementation of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific. The China-led FTAAP is supported by the 21 APEC member nations. If the pact comes into effect, it'll be one of the largest FTAs in the world, covering more than half of the global economy and trade. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A United Nations General Assembly committee has passed a resolution on North Korea's human rights situation that contains much stronger words than ones gone by. The resolution, drafted by the European Union and Japan, was adopted Thursday with 112 votes in favour, 19 against and 50 abstentions. Like last year's, the resolution calls for the North Korean leadership to be referred to the International Criminal Court, citing ongoing systematic and gross violations of human rights there. However, this year, they also included a call for North Korea to become a member of the International Labour Organization and comply with all labour-related pacts. Should the resolution be adopted at a plenary session in mid-December, it will mark the 11th year that the UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution on North Korean human rights since it was first introduced in 2005. North Korea's representative at the UN denounced the resolution, calling it a US-led plot to topple the regime. Consumers in the United States will now be able to buy, if they want, genetically engineered salmon for the first time. The US Food and Drug Administration said Thursday that it approved genetically modified salmon as safe for human consumption after 2 decades of deliberation. The approval allows AquaBounty, the biotech company that first applied for approval, to begin marketing its faster-growing salmon. The FDA determined that they have met the regulatory requirements, but environmental groups are strongly opposed to the move, saying the salmon could pose risks to other fish if it were to escape into the environment. Now, in sports news, Korea pulled off a remarkable comeback to beat Japan 4-3 in the semis of the Premier 12 baseball tournament. Now, South Korea were trailing 3-0 after 8 innings, but rallied in the 9th to reach the final of the inaugural competition. South Korea will face the winner of the United States-Mexico semi-finals set for this Friday, and then they'll be back to the Tokyo Dome on Saturday for the final. That game starts at 7 p.m. Korea time. Now, over the past few years, sharing cars, homes, clothes and even labour has really taken off around the world, and this sharing economy is expected to continue its exponential growth in the years to come. But experts say there are some regulatory challenges that need to be overcome for it to work better. Our Oh Seung has this report.
4 years ago, sharing economy was one of 10 big ideas expected to change the world, according to Time magazine. Today, the enormity of its impact is evident in daily life. On a global scale, millions of people are choosing to lend and borrow cars, accommodation and even labour through digital platforms such as Airbnb, Zipcar and Uber. According to Mass Solution, a US market research firm, the sharing economy market has seen an average annual growth of 82% in the last few years. However, a number of inadequate regulations still hinders it from reaching its full potential. Take Airbnb, for example.
The regulations at the moment are really kind of on extreme measures. Either there's no regulation in some areas, or there's very strong regulation for commercial businesses. Home sharing really means that there's this place in the middle where occasionally hosts will rent out their homes.
At an international forum held in Seoul, business leaders and experts from international organisations are seeking to resolve these problems. With sharing economy having a potential to create over $300 billion for the next 10 years, experts say clear-cut standards are needed around the world to accommodate the shift from business to consumer model to peer-to-peer services.
There's a need to have a specific regulatory framework which balances the need to open financial instruments for SMEs and to limit risk for the financial system, and especially to have some suitable investor protection rules in there.
And for platforms, they may need to report trade information to government, make a liability insurance in order to protect consumers and sellers. For the sake of self-regulation, they may establish a system of verification and secure payment system.
To harness all the benefits of a sharing economy, experts say governments around the world must create a fair and solid framework to both support innovative businesses and protect customers. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for tuning in to our newscasts, and we'll be back throughout the day with even more newscasts. Goodbye.